3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. From Philadelphia to Los Angeles and everywhere in between. Filmed at the Nittany No Huddle Studio. It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
We are the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. Decided to change it up a little bit. I got Coach Devin and Zach here on the line. Biggest game of the year, in my opinion. Really seals the fate of Penn State football for this year. So we got Penn State, big noon kickoff versus Michigan Wolverines. With all the drama surrounding Michigan right now, I'm sure that's all they're going to be talking about leading into this game. You know, is Harbaugh going to be suspended? All that nonsense. I'm not really concerned with that, to be honest. And I know we talked a little bit about it before, guys, but I don't think we're going to see much from that this season anyways. The bigger thing is, can Franklin beat Michigan and maybe improve that record versus top 10 opponents? So, like I said, big noon kickoff in State College. Big noon will be there. I didn't see where game day was this week, but
they're Ole Miss at Georgia.
Another good game. I just feel like, obviously being a Penn State podcast, this is the game for us. Like, we put on a great performance last week at Maryland. Now, was that just, an anomaly, or is that kind of who we are now? So I've been seeing a lot of people who are riding the hype train, like Drew Aller has it figured out now. Like, we're gonna beat Michigan. I don't think we need to go that crazy, but it was a great showing. So I'll turn it over to you guys first. Devin, I know you like to do some stats on the rivalry. I guess not a rivalry, but stats on the two teams. Yeah, unrivaled. Exactly. What do you got for us?
So this is the 27th all-time meeting between the teams. Penn State actually trails it 16-10. Although they are 3-3 in the last 6 matchups. Obviously, last year was kind of a disaster, and it somehow put our podcast on the map a little bit because it was the most embarrassing performance that Penn State had last year, a 41-17, just absolute beatdown. Michigan rushed for 418 yards, averaged 7.5 yards per carry in that game last year. Just absolutely dominated them. Michigan obviously is really, really good. They're 9-0, ranked 3rd in this week's college football playoff. What else do we got here? Last weekend, Michigan beat Purdue pretty bad. The game was 41-13, but it really wasn't even that close. And the Wolverines are 1st in the nation in scoring defense, total defense, passing defense, and then they're 9th in rushing defense. So they have one heck of a defense, and it's going to be quite the battle. So,
yeah, and with that overall record, maybe some people forget, but Joe Paul was historically very bad against Michigan. I think we lost 10 straight at one point.
That sounds close. I don't know if it was 10, but
Zach, I'm sure you remember every single
yes,
one of those.
I think I want to say from 1997, and I'm actually pulling up Wikipedia at the moment. I want to say 97 to 07. Let's see here. Yeah, from 1997 to 2007. They didn't play every year, but that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 straight Michigan wins from basically in the sort of the Lloyd Carr era. Penn State won in 94, 95, and 96. And then Lloyd Carr got the next 9. And then, of course, Penn State won in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2013, while Michigan was kind of in their lost in the wilderness years with Rich Rod and Brady Hoke. And interestingly enough, I would say while we're talking just the head-to-head matchup, the Ohio State and Michigan kind of get lumped in together for Penn State fans when we're talking about James Franklin and his obvious failures in some of these bigger games. But in reality, if you look at Michigan and you take out 2014 and 2015, which is obviously kind of just like cheating, but I'm not too concerned with how we matched up in those early years of the sanctions. But he started in 2016. I mean, he's 3-4 against Michigan. Is that great? No, but is that like kind of what you would expect? Probably. The big thing for me is just like not being able to maintain home field advantage is the concerning aspect. And so if they go on to lose on Saturday, you're looking at 2 straight home losses to Michigan in State College and 3 straight home losses to Ohio State. So it's one thing where it's already daunting enough where basically at the beginning of the year, you look at a game in Columbus and a game in Ann Arbor and you're like, that's a loss. It just is. There's nothing, and then all of a sudden you can't win any of the, you just can't keep pace at home. That's kind of that's what made last year against Ohio State and 2021 against Michigan. And we'll probably talk about that game a little bit when we get into some of the more specific aspects of the game, mostly because I don't want to talk about last year at all because it was just so ugly. 2021 is a game, another Penn State Michigan noon start where Penn State really could have and perhaps should have won that game. But all that to say, it's been a mostly even matchup. But all of a sudden, if Penn State loses this one on Saturday, then you can basically say Michigan has won the last 3. And frankly, the last one that Penn State would have won would have been 2020 with nobody in the stadium in Ann Arbor. And I mean, I think our followers are well aware of how we view 2020 really across the board, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. It's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, it counts. It's in the record books, but I don't put a whole lot of stock into it.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't note is this will be a stripe out game. So,
Wow.
Yeah. This is the 8th stripe out game. So I have some fun facts. We've been doing the stripe out since 2015, except for 2020, obviously. I don't think they striped out the cardboard guys for that one, but
They should have. That would have been amazing.
The first stripe out was in 2015 versus Rutgers. I was actually at that game. 28-3 win. It was a night game. Then we beat Temple the following season, 34-27, which is kind of embarrassing. Then 2017, Nebraska, 56-44. Then lost to Michigan State in 2018. Zach likes to remember that one. I think we lost because it was a stripe out, to be honest.
I think we lost because it was the week after Ohio State, and that's just what we do is play poorly after Ohio State week.
Typically. I mean, that seems to be the trend. Then 2019, Pitt was a 17-10 win. Indiana the following year, well, skip 2020, 2021, 24-0. And then last year versus Ohio State was the stripe out, and it was a 31-44 loss. So they've only lost twice in stripe out. So we'll see if it's 2 straight or if it's getting back in the W column. So
Jordan, that's so funny to me though, because like the people who always bring up Penn State's record in the whiteout game because it's like not that great, because we always typically until lately because of Big Noon, we've always played good teams at night and we've done the whiteout. So it's kind of funny that the stripe out, we've played like absolutely terrible teams. So our record looks good there until like last year, Ohio State, and this year, Michigan. So yeah, that's kind of funny to me that like people care about that record in those games.
Yeah, like none of those teams were ranked except for Ohio State last year.
Right.
So it is kind of funny. I thought it was interesting when I read it. And
I for all the jokes aside, I actually do kind of like Penn State's stripe out. I think it looks cool, especially in a noon game, because I mean the whiteout is so special at night that I feel like the stripe out, Penn State does it better than anybody else, and it just I actually do think it looks pretty cool. It's corny, but it looks cool.
Yeah, I don't know why we can't just white out every game. I don't.
Yeah,
like
seriously.
Just as sort of a blending of the last two discussions, the stripe out and white out in the context of the Michigan series. So the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3 times that Penn State has played Michigan in the whiteout, Penn State has won. So you got 2019, that was the game where Michigan had to call timeout on the very first play. You got 2017.
That game.
that was the game when Penn State just housed them 42-13. And then you've got the 2013 game, which is the Allen Robinson overtime game. But the last time, basically every home game other than those where Penn State has played Michigan, they've lost. So It's one of those things where thank you, Fox, for becoming the primary broadcast rights partner for the Big Ten, so they get the first pick, and all the big games are now noon.
Yeah. All right, we got a comment here. So Junior says, I get hyped up for these matchups. Maybe they'll put together the game of Franklin's tenure. If not, fired. I love it.
Straight to the point.
I think that's how a lot of people feel, to be honest. And, we're talking about win-losses here. I don't expect any coach to beat Ohio State and Michigan every year. But a lot of those games are lost because of coaching. I think that's the thing. I know, Zach, I know that's how you feel. A lot of it is those are games where we can win and it's right there for the taking, and it just seems to never happen. Like, it's either a blowout or like something crazy like the blocked field goal. Like, it's never like, oh, it's close coming down to the wire and we just like put it all together and have that final drive and, really seal it. So
as far as like, you mean, are you talking whiteouts in general or
just any big game with Franklin, really? Yeah,
it's just, I don't know. We've had a few where it's come down to the wire and we've kind of lost it late, but for the most part, I think like the Ohio State game earlier this year is a good example of where a lot of the, especially the Ohio State road games, where it feels like every time they go out to Columbus, we're in the game and we hang around, and it's like mathematically it's a game, but it has the feel of Ohio State's never not in control of the game. It's just like, it just doesn't feel like there's a chance of breaking through, even though on the scoreboard you look up and it's like a 1-score game. But it's just, and part of the problem too is we've had some really good offensive years with teams that just didn't have the defense to match it, and then we've had other years like 2021 or maybe this year where you feel like you have the defense to play with anybody, and we just don't quite have the offensive firepower to keep up with, especially this year, the way Michigan's looking. I think, if somebody woke up from a coma in the last couple of years, they'd be really surprised, not just to see that Michigan's like murdering people, but the way that they're doing it, and especially offensively, the style that they're playing, just they're very like multiple on offense, and I think they're very balanced. You hear Franklin, if you listen to the press conference, he talks about balance all the time. And I don't think we've been very balanced this year, both in terms of balance within the offense and then also balance and complementary football between the offense and defense. Michigan, to my mind, is like the perfect example of a balanced football team right now, where the offense is really good, the defense is really good. The pass game is really good, the run game is really good. The pass defense is really good, the run defense is very good. The kicker has been very good. They don't make a lot of special teams mistakes. They don't commit a lot of penalties. It's just like balance across the board. There's not like a weak link dragging the team down.
Yeah, especially since they fired Scallions. That's a joke. It's a joke.
Didn't take long to get there. Thank you to Uncle June, by the way, for the comment.
So speaking of balance, Michigan ranks 5th in the nation in scoring with 40.7 points per game. That's first in the Big Ten. 42nd in total offense, second in the Big Ten with 424 yards per game. Now, their passing offense is a little bit lower. It's 44th in passing offense, but still third in the Big Ten, and then 50th in rushing offense. And I know that's something we were talking about before the game, kind of their rushing, maybe not issues, but just the surprise of their rushing, getting away from Blake Corum and seeing Edwards having kind of a better year than Corum is a little surprising. But Corum does lead the country with 16 rushing touchdowns on only 649 yards, which is kind of crazy to think about. So they definitely utilize them in the red zone a lot. But then they also have a great defense, statistically anyways. Have they really played anybody? Not really, but they have taken care of business on everybody they have played. So they're first in the nation in scoring defense, only giving up 6.7 points per game and giving up 231 total yards per game, which is just kind of crazy. So I'll let either of you guys talk about, we can start with the offense or the defense, up to you. I'll turn it over to either one of you.
I think the crazy thing is I think we just know so much about Michigan that I don't think we need to go into a ton of specifics. The one thing that I will say is, and I said this to Zach and Jordan before we came on the air, it just stands out to me that Donovan Edwards only has 74 carries this year because he's somebody who I think is super talented. Now I know I'm pretty sure Jordan doesn't like Blake Corum. Is that correct?
I'm indifferent. I just thought he was
I
overhyped
felt like
a
you
little
told me
bit.
before you didn't like him, but anyway, so like for the people that don't like Blake Corum, I do think he's really talented. I don't see him being an NFL running back just with his
Size.
style and his size and everything, but I think he's a phenomenal college running back. So for him to be rushing and averaging only 72 yards per game, I think it just says how bad Michigan is beating people right now. Jordan said it before we went on the air, is that, I mean, they have, I don't want to count all these people. They have like 18 different players that have at least one rushing attempt this year because they're just blowing teams out. So I'm cautious that I think Donovan Edwards could have a breakout game this weekend. Just as a reminder, last year he rushed for 173 yards, 2 touchdowns on only 16 carries. Blake Corum had 166 yards on 28 carries. So Donovan Edwards, who only has 230 yards through 9 games, had almost the same amount last year against Penn State. And again, I know it's different. It's volume versus quality touches and stuff like that. But it's just, I think Donovan Edwards is a name that I'm watching out for this weekend, that he could have a breakout game. I've been saying it all year. I think JJ McCarthy is really, really good. I know at the beginning of the year, some people were saying he wasn't as good as maybe he should be, and he was kind of the weak link for Michigan. I don't see it. I think that JJ McCarthy is a really, really good quarterback, and I think he's in a really good position for Michigan. I mean, completing 76% of his passes. That's absurd. 76% of his passes, only 3 interceptions. So, I mean, Drew Aller has 1, so I guess Drew Aller's better. But JJ McCarthy on 206 attempts has 3 interceptions. I still can't. That number 76% just blows my mind. And then I guess before I turn it over to Zach, a couple other things that really stand out to me is, and Zach is usually really good at pointing this out too, is third down numbers. Michigan's offense is converting 56% of the time on third down, and they're only giving up defensively 29%. Now, again, I know they've played some really bad teams, but Penn State has also played some really bad teams. So to me, I mean, we said it last year, but this game 100% is going to come down to third downs because I think both teams are going to get stops. I don't think either team is going to be able to score. I mean, I know some of us think that it's going to be in the 30s or whatever, but I don't think this is a game that's going to be a run and gun style. This is going to be a grinded out. Who can control the time of possession? Who can convert third down? Who can get to the red zone? It's probably another stat that I'm going to steal from Zach. All year, 9 games, Michigan has allowed 11 red zone attempts. In 9 games, 11 trips to the red zone by opponents. That is an absurd number to me. And if Penn State can't make it to the red zone, I mean, we got to settle for 45-yard field goals, and I don't think that's a game that we want to be in a battle with. Although Falcons has been great, and I'm really glad we found a kicker. We can't be trading 3 for 7. So those are the things that really stand out to me more so than just personnel. Is just those little nuances. Can we convert on third down? Can we stop them on third down? And are we even going to make it to the red zone? Because nobody else has. So,
yeah. The crazy thing, I think up until recently, nobody had even taken a snap like inside their 10 or something. Yeah. There've been so few trips into the red zone, but then like so few that even actually got inside the 10. But I mean, I'm not going to say a whole lot because you kind of nailed it as far as all the key metrics for me. I think third down is the most important part of this game on both sides of the ball. It's if we just have visions of last year with Michigan's offense where it just feels like, have we gotten better in run defense? Yeah, I mean, we're number 1 in the country in run defense, so it's like,
right?
How can I sit here and complain? But at the same time, have we gotten noticeably bigger at defensive tackle? Maybe a little bit. Have we gotten, I think, perhaps better and smarter at the linebacker position? Yes, definitely. I think that was one of the takeaways for me from the game last year was, Franklin railed about how small we were and we didn't have enough size. And I think that was a little bit, I think it was a little bit unfair. I think one of the problems, and I don't like to sort of drag people through the mud, but if you go back and watch that game, Tyler Elsdon had a really bad game at middle linebacker. Kobe King, when he was in there as well. Even Abdul Carter was, at that point, I think Abdul Carter had played in like 3.5 college football games, considering he got thrown out of the Purdue game. We just were not ready, I think, from a linebacker standpoint, and it's a whole different operation this year. I mean, I do think some of it is just size, and we've talked about it all year. We're not built with, your typical like 1-tech and 3-tech defensive tackles that are all, 320 pounds. And so I think Michigan, as far as running between the tackles, is probably going to have some level of success. So getting back to the third down, it's just, how do we get them off schedule? Because, if you don't get them off schedule, they're going to be converting short yardage downs. And even if you do get them off schedule, they now have the passing attack that I don't think they quite had last year. Not that McCarthy was bad last year, but it almost feels like to me that they're as much or more a pass first offense than they are a run offense. Devin hit the numbers on the head. Donovan Edwards, again, there hasn't been a lot of volume, so maybe we don't want to read too much into it, but it's shocking to me that he is averaging 3.1 yards per carry running behind that offensive line against some of the slop that they faced this year. And really for me last year, he was the guy, Corum's great, but Donovan Edwards to me was the more sort of athletic, the more elusive breakaway runner. And I look at the box score right now, and he's got a long run in the year of 14 yards. So I kind of wonder if maybe he's going through like the Nick Singleton sophomore slump type situation where they're just almost pressing too hard to get him to break out. I don't know. I mean, the other part of it is because both of those guys they've not put too much wear and tear on them. They're going to be fresh for the back end of the schedule with, Penn State and Maryland and Ohio State at the end of the playoffs, which if you're a Michigan fan, I think you're thrilled about that. You'd love to have a rusher that's, in the, Blake Corum theoretically could probably be in the Heisman mix, but with the stats he has, I mean, he has a lot of touchdowns, but as far as yardage, not so much. But and then back to the third down discussion, I think on the other side of the ball, if you're Penn State, I mean, we've seen this movie before. We watched the Ohio State game where we were atrocious on third down. I mean, just absolutely atrocious. And so the key for me there is you got to stay ahead of the sticks, and we got to run the ball consistently. I really want to see a aggressive run first style of offense to begin, because I think in the Ohio State game we ran the ball pretty well early on, and then we just started to go away from it. And clearly Allard just didn't have it that game. But I also think you're not going to come in and just like ground and pound 3 yards in a cloud of dust, Michigan. So they've got to be prepared to unleash Aller, and we just need to see that the Aller that we saw against Maryland. Obviously, there's a big difference between the talent on the field as far as Maryland versus Michigan, but he just looked like a whole different guy. And some of that again is you're playing lesser competition, so you're more confident, whatever it might be, but he needs to come onto the field. He needs to come out looking like that guy. And there's going to be mistakes. Michigan is going to, they're going to get some pressure. There's maybe going to be turnovers. Their defense is going to do some nice things, but he needs to come out. And honestly, the Ohio State game, what it looked like to me was he felt the pressure of, I can't lose this game for the defense. And I'm hopeful that the messaging that he's receiving during this week of practice is a different tone, where it's like, hey, we need you, right? Like, this isn't a don't lose the game for us type situation. We need you to come out, be aggressive. We trust you. We're going to have to rely on you, and kind of build him up that way. Because I think, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, I feel like all season long there was way too much emphasis on like, we don't turn the ball over. He doesn't make any mistakes, no interceptions. And that's good. But also I feel like they kind of boxed him into this really conservative, really cautious thinking. And let's be honest, we're the big underdog this week. There's no need to think like that coming out into this game. They've got to have him coming out confident. Dante Cephas breaking out against Maryland, that's got to help as well. So, yeah, I kind of rambled on there, but for me, third down is really, really big, because part of helping Aller stay confident is not consistently putting him in third and longs that we're not going to convert consistently.
Yeah, speaking of thirds, this may be a hot take, but this game will be won or lost in the third quarter, because neither team has given up a single point in the third quarter. So shout out to Devin for giving me that little stat there. But that's crazy. I mean, we've seen Manny Diaz be able to get the defense adjusted coming out of halftime. We've looked really good coming out of halftime. So, if we keep it close going into halftime, defense could have that turnaround, in the third quarter, and we could be in a game. So I think for me also the biggest thing is we haven't really seen McCarthy under pressure, like legitimate pressure. So I don't know if Chop Robinson is going to be back.
Unclear. What I've heard is he could have played against Maryland. Probably.
But they rested him.
Yeah.
That's what I heard too. I heard he was like warming up and they just kind of were like, let's see how the game goes. If we need you, maybe we'll bring you in. But obviously that wasn't the case. But I think if you can get pressure on McCarthy, we haven't really seen him have to deal with an exuberant amount of pressure, which is something that Penn State's defense does really well. I guess we can go into score predictions. We kind of talked everything in whole. For me, I know one of our comments said they didn't feel good about this game. I don't either. I think it will be relatively low scoring, but I don't think it's crazy to see, 4 touchdowns for one of the teams. And for that reason, I'm going to say Michigan 28, Penn State 17. So we may get a look out for a special teams touchdown from Penn State. I'll put that out there. So I'll turn it over to you, Devin.
Okay, so I'm gonna go off the reservation here. I just talked about how much I don't feel good about this, so I'm going all in. Penn State. I'm gonna go high because I think it's gonna go to overtime. So I just said I don't think either team's gonna score a lot, but because it's gonna go to overtime, I think it's gonna end up scoring a lot. So it's kind of like that 2013, the 4 overtime game that was like 40-43, but that game was like 20-20 in regulation or whatever.
Old overtime
so I'm gonna go
rules.
new overtime rules, 2 points. So I'm gonna go Penn State 38, Michigan 37.
Ooh,
2 overtime.
I like it. I like the confidence.
I like it. So I'm gonna go Michigan 30, Penn State 20. I think largely this game will play out somewhat similar to the Ohio State game in that I think Harbaugh will not be too overly aggressive. I think he will trust his defense, recognize Penn State's shortcomings on offense. So I don't expect to see I expect to see both coaches coach somewhat conservatively and cautiously in the first half. Because, as Jordan pointed out, both teams think they are as good as anybody in the country at going into the locker room, making adjustments, coming back out, and dominating the third quarter. That's why, to Jordan's point, whoever wins the third quarter maybe wins the game. And for me, with Penn State, as Penn State fan, I think you got to go into the half tied or with the lead, tied or within 1 score. I think at any point in this game, if they fall behind by more than 1 score, it just will feel insurmountable. And being able to string together stops and scores going the other way is just going to be really tough. I mean, I think for me, again, third down, I talked about third down a lot. I think making Michigan kick field goals when they get in the red zone will be huge as well. And conversely, Penn State, I don't expect to have us be able to move the ball consistently and have a lot of long drives. We know what our limitations are with the explosive plays. I don't really expect us to just all of a sudden find that against Michigan. So basically offensively for us to do anything, we're going to have to string together methodical drives. That's really hard to do against Michigan. So for me, I want a aggressive Franklin on 4th and short because I don't think field goals are going to win the game. And I don't think they're going to get a lot of scoring opportunities. So when you have a chance to score, it needs to be 7. That for me is something to watch. Now, the last time Michigan was in town was the game, if you recall, where Franklin faked 2 field goals on the same drive in like the first quarter. I don't know that I want that bold, but I just don't think field goals are going to win it. Michigan's offense, as good as our defense is, and as much as we like our defense, and I do expect our running defense to be a lot better than it was last year. I mean, if we give up 418 yards and get on the ground, it'll be an interesting podcast afterwards. I just think actually we're improved in run defense. Again, we're number 1 in the country, so it's kind of hard for me to sit here and like be scared about that. But I actually just think Michigan's passing game is improved. I think we've seen some chinks in the armor and in terms of our pass defense that have been somewhat concerning. It's not been a great last month for Kalen King. I mean, he got burnt a little bit at Maryland a couple times. Johnny Dixon got a PI, and Daquan Hardy's probably been playing as well as anybody in our secondary. And I like our secondary. I'm not at all sitting here saying, they're frauds and Michigan's going to torch them through the air. I just think Michigan, Roman Wilson, we didn't talk about the receivers. I really like Roman Wilson. He's a tough cover. Cornelius Johnson's another really good one. Their tight end Loveland is really good. Blake Corum gets involved in the pass game out of the backfield. So it just feels like a game for me where Penn State needs bare minimum. They're going to need 4 touchdowns to win the game. And so for me, how many drives are they going to get where they actually get down into the red zone or deep into Michigan territory? I'm just not seeing a lot. So I think when they're down there, it's just got to result in touchdowns.
The other thing with that, Zach,
20,
the other thing with that, Zach, about the passing game is we just kind of talked about Donovan Edwards. We should probably mention that he is 3rd on the team in receiving or in receptions and has 24 catches for 225. So even though he hasn't had a ton of volume rushing the ball, they have been using him in the passing game. Just since you brought up the receivers, it's probably worth mentioning there.
Yeah, they got really nice balance there. I mean, you basically got two receivers, a tight end, and really 2 tight ends. AJ Barner, their second tight end, has some decent stats on the year. I mean, Roman Wilson for me though is
he's the guy.
He's the guy. He's got 10 touchdowns. He's averaging 16.4 per catch. I mean, both him and Cornelius Johnson they're not just reliable. They catch the football. They run good routes. They can also burn a little bit, and they're the type of guys that can take the top off of a defense in the way that I don't think Penn State really has. So, I think if you're Penn State's defense, you got to make Michigan be the methodical team that just marches slowly down the field. Don't give them anything easy because they're gonna get theirs anyway. You just got to make it as hard as possible, and that bend but don't break defense that we're always talking about. For me, that's where it's got to show up in defensive red zone. Make Michigan kick field goals, and on offense, you got to have touchdowns. For me, that's one of the what does each team do when they get their opportunities down in the red zone? It will be really telling.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest question for me is, what is Gus Johnson's nickname going to be for Roman Wilson? So,
how often do you think of the Roman Empire Wilson?
Oh, that's a really good point.
I was going to say the Holy Roman Wilson, but I think that one's better.
He'll probably just keep yelling Maserati Marv the whole time, so he's still obsessed with that.
Yeah. Make sure to, if you guys are watching,
Honda Accord. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but
yeah, if you guys are watching, make sure to leave us a comment. Let us know your score prediction. We're gonna go through the college football rankings real quick because they just dropped a little bit earlier, and then we'll wrap the show up. But make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll pull up the college football rankings. All right. So right off the bat, the first 5, well, I think pretty much up until 8 stayed the same, right?
I think the top 9, right? Top 9 stayed the same.
Yeah, and then Oklahoma was 10 last week. I think,
yeah, Oklahoma was 8.
Oklahoma might have been 9. They might have been 9. And then Ole Miss and Penn State just slotted up one.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the top 10 will change, I'm going to guess, this weekend.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you've got Ole Miss playing Georgia as well. So you've got 2 teams that are like prospective playoff teams at the moment in Georgia and Michigan. And then you've got 2 teams playing them that are like ready to kick the door down and be a part of that club in Ole Miss and Penn State. And either you have one or both of Ole Miss and Penn State win, and then all of a sudden the chaos you just start adding to the list of one-loss teams, or Georgia and Michigan win, and it kind of starts to make the picture a little bit clearer. No disrespect to Louisville, but basically if Georgia and Michigan win today, then all we're talking about is 1 through 8 as potential playoff teams.
Yeah, pretty much. And then USC is out of the top 25. Iowa at 22, kind of surprising there. Looks good for our resume. I'll say that at least. Kind of surprised Notre Dame's still ranked, but
Yeah, they've been super high on LSU and Notre Dame all year, and to be fair, I mean, I think it's probably fair to have them as the highest ranked 3-loss teams because their schedules have been very difficult. At the same time, though, you look at a team like Arizona, the way that they've been playing lately. If you put Arizona and LSU on the field together right now, I'd give Arizona about an even shot to win that game. Same thing, Notre Dame. Tulane all of a sudden is with the Air Force shocking upset loss to Army. Tulane's in the driver's seat for the Group of 5, automatic bid into the New Year 6.
Well, not so fast. James Madison,
hot off the press.
They put in an application basically to get them waived, so they are allowed to participate in a bowl game this year. Is that correct, Zach? I didn't really read all of that.
So basically, there's a rule, and I forget the amount of years, but when you make the jump from the football championship subdivision to FBS, you have to you're ineligible for the postseason for like 2 or 3 or 4 years, whatever it is. No matter what. I mean, they could be number 1 in the college football playoff ranking, and based on that rule, they're not eligible. They submitted some kind of request to the NCAA to like forego that rule or waive it or something, but I could very easily see the NCAA just saying, sorry, a rule's a rule, and we don't care that you're 9-0 and you're going to win the Fun Belt, and probably ought to be ranked at this point, or maybe will be ranked at some point.
Yeah. Well, they would probably get back to them like next year on that, if I had to guess.
And honestly, if Tulane's going to have, I don't know who they finish with, but SMU is 7-2 right now. They're probably another team that's maybe kind of just on the outside looking into the top 25. But if Tulane runs the table and beats SMU in the East, the American title game, then they're definitely your top Group of 5 team. No matter what James Madison does.
Yeah. Overall, I'm kind of surprised Mizzou didn't drop more as well, but
I mean, they played really tough against Georgia.
To me,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Mizzou's ranking and what they did after their road loss at Georgia, it was pretty reminiscent of how the committee treated Penn State after its road loss at number 1 Ohio State. Basically, it was like, oh, okay, you played them pretty tough on the road. We're just going to drop you like 3 spots or whatever it ended. I forget where Mizzou was last week. They might have only been,
I think they were 12.
Yeah, they were 12, I think.
And interestingly, they play Tennessee this week. I look at Tennessee 13, Mizzou 14, and say, how? Yeah. Tennessee played nobody of substance in the non-con. Mizzou beat K-State in the non-con. Mizzou hasn't played Florida yet, which is a good thing because Tennessee got absolutely boat raced by Florida. But Mizzou's one of Mizzou's losses, well, their 2 losses are Georgia and LSU. Tennessee got hammered by Florida, lost at Alabama. That's a decent loss, but I just don't see. To me, if you ask what team is the most overranked or overrated on this list, I would probably point to Tennessee and say, how are they 13? How are they 13? I don't see it at all.
They're a big brand. That's why.
I don't know. I mean, so is like Oklahoma is a good one to rag on at the moment because they've just lost 2 games in a row. So they went to Kansas and lost to, I think, a very good Kansas team, a team I've been banging the drum for all year that's ranked number 16. They went, and then the next week they again went on the road to Oklahoma State, who was hyped up for probably the last Bedlam game ever. And I think a very good team, maybe one of the hottest teams in the country at the moment. And they have a win over Texas.
And Tennessee has a win over nobody.
I think I'd probably have Oklahoma over Tennessee. Now, recency bias will say that they're a team that's just lost 2 games in a row. But again, at Kansas, at Oklahoma State. First off, thanks a lot to the schedulers for giving you 2 difficult road games in a row. But or even Utah. Utah's another one where, yes, they absolutely got killed at home by Oregon. But I think Oregon maybe is one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country. And Utah's only other losses to Oregon State, who's number 12, and Utah has a win over that same Florida team that annihilated Tennessee. So I don't know. I really think we've talked about this in past years. I really think they rank the top 5 or 8 or 10 or whatever it is that they view as the teams that are in the mix. And then they they build the back half of the top 25 in a way to justify the rankings that they have at the top.
I would agree with that. But yeah, I think that's all I have for college football rankings this week. I'm sure it's going to be interesting next week. If I could see some upsets happening this week, I should say. So I'm really excited for Ole Miss, Georgia, to be honest. I think Ole Miss might give Georgia more than they might be expecting. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great game too. I agree.
But I think that's all I have. Make sure to leave us a comment with your score prediction on any of the games we talked about, but specifically the Penn State game. You guys have anything else you want to talk about before we sign off here?
Nope.
I got nothing.
Yeah, nothing. All right, that's going to be it. We will be doing an instant reaction after the game, so looking forward to that. Hopefully it's celebratory, but I know last year we were very hard on Penn State after this game and got a lot of love from Michigan fans because of that. So if you're still subscribed, Michigan fans, stay tuned for that. It'll be interesting to say the least. So that's all I got. Nittany No Huddle Nation out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.